He really was. And I just to go back to something you said early on, that he was gone for just 20 years. And when he was
Right.
gone from I guess it would be the first time the Beatles came to America would be what, 1963,
Yeah, I
62,
was going
something
to say
like that.
62, 63. Yeah.
Yep.
Hmm.
And then he came back, which would have been in the early 80s, and over the course of the second half of the 60s, the entire 70s, and then the early 80s, it had become a godless, not quite anti-Christian, but certainly not a pro-Christian nation anymore. And just
Right.
how what an incredibly short time that excuse me, that is just
Right.
20 years. Like you would have thought it would take 60 years. Like no, it was
No.
a hard left turn.
Yeah, yeah, truly. And when he came to the States, he lived here for a number of years because he was finishing his degrees at like Princeton Theological Seminary, and I believe he was at Gordon Conwell as well. So he was here for a while, but it was just that 18-year period that he was in France when this had taken place, where it was so disconcerting to him when he came back. Yeah.
Yeah, and to see the the infiltration of the New Age. Now, in some sense, it really began in earnest in the United States with the original Chicago World Parliament of Religions in
Right.
1893. That was the first entry point. In fact, the man who started that, not the man who started, but that really started that shift was Swami Vivekananda. And
Yes.
I've been to his ashram in India, and so
Wow.
and so I could talk about all that, but the way that it accelerated after the 1960s, particularly the second
Hmm.
half, the spread of the New Age, formally known as the New Age in the 70s, but then it's entrenchment. And that's the thing is when you
Hmm.
talk about New Age to people today, like, wasn't that something that happened in like the 80s? Well, it
Yeah.
was as a formal movement, but now New Age, Gnostic, mystical culture is American culture in the main.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you. There's a really interesting book called American Veda.
Hmm.
Um, have you read American Veda?
I would know, but I was just thinking about it today. Philip Goldberg.
Philip Goldberg, yeah. And that's a book that Dr. Jones gave me to read when I was first starting to look at yoga, actually. And I think he really
Mm.
put his finger on a lot of this. And I mean, you can say Gnostic and you can say Hindu, and I mean no disrespect, but ultimately what you find is that the vocabulary might be different and some of like the cultural origins are a little bit different, but the ideas underneath those and the ideas that we're embracing are exactly the same. You know,
Yes, they are.
it's the not to-ness of the whole deal, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, and I think it's really funny, and I'm a little bit jealous, but like Dr. Jones has a license plate that says all is two. I've, I've been for a long time trying to think of some way, you know, to like rework that so I can have that license plate too. But when you find out that, you know, these terms, it's not just all is one, but it's that all is not two.
Yeah.
And when you start to understand what that means and what sort of like, um, you know, when you're say going through enlightenment from a yogic perspective, or when you're talking about the non-dualism of Gnosticism, you're like, wait a second, like these are just different vocabulary terms to describe the exact same ideas. And that's just what
Yeah.
it's jarring to recognize, but it's really helpful to recognize too, because it helps you categorize things as a Christian and really understand them better.
Yes, and to see the way that this non-dual idea tries to work its way into Christian circles, and
Absolutely.
such the point that Dr. Jones's ministry is not just needed to evangelize the world, but also within Christianity itself, so Christians can come to recognize the way that the language, like you said, walking the labyrinth. What is
Mhm.
why is that so bad? Well, walking the labyrinth, the purpose of that meditative practice. Maybe I'll let you speak to it. What is the purpose of walking the labyrinth?
Well, I've never walked a labyrinth, so I've
Sure.
only ever heard about it second hand. And I live really close to a place called Encinitas, which is
Hmm.
something of a mecca in California for all of this new age stuff. And there are labyrinths, even in people's backyards. But like you are trying to approach like the inner spark at your interior, that inner divine spark, and to become one sort of with the universe, to open up your mind by walking that labyrinth, to do away with distinctions and to be to to open your mind then to like the divine forces within you as united with the universe. And it strikes me
Mhm.
very similarly to like the idea of samadhi, like this absorption into the universe and this doing away with all distinction. And of
Yep.
course, this is radically anti-biblical because how did God create? He separated the waters from the earth, the light from the dark. Like it's an ordering of creation as he creates, setting it into order and making things distinct.
Mhm.
And the labyrinth seems to me like a thinly veneered um, Christian practice of trying to undo those distinctions. And so
Yes.
that then makes it oneist or monist or Gnostic, not twoist or Christian, um, according to the Bible's terms.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's the general American, well, say Western cultural
Hmm.
thrust of some sort of union with God instead of being
Hmm.
made in his image. Like all of the languages, we are one, breathing, meditation
Hmm.
practices, all of this is meant to sort of strip away your own consciousness so you recognize the unity, the oneness behind everything. And
Yeah.
Christianity absorbs this and abandons the two-ness. Please go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was thinking even with the term meditation, Christian meditation is a wildly different thing.
Yeah.
And I've talked to a lot of typically women who
Mhm.
are involved in what they call Christian yoga, and they talk about how like they won't say the om or they won't say the
Oh, wow.
mantras, but what they'll just repeat a verse or a holy word like over and over and over again. But the point is to repeat it to the point that it loses all meaning. So no longer
Yeah.
is it a distinct word that carries meaning that we consider, right? It still is seeking to kind of zone yourself out so that you can
Yeah.
become one with something else. And frankly, you're opening yourself up to spiritual influence. And it's not the Holy Spirit that's influencing you. It is the powers that war against us
Yeah.
um, in the spiritual realm. And um, that I think it's sad that that can feel embarrassing to say as a Christian, because people will make accusations that you are being fundamentalist or that you are being like a scaremonger or I mean, I've gotten those claims from, let me make it clear, I'm not embarrassed.
Of
But I
course.
think that there are Christians who feel embarrassed to say things like that because it sounds like you're being a fundy. Um, and yet all you're doing is acknowledging the truth of the world around us as
Yeah.
described by the Bible. And so yeah, it's just very strange to me, the resistance, especially within the church, that we have to talking clearly about these practices. People cling to these practices in very interesting ways, even within the church.
Yes, they do. So let's do a deep dive then. Let's get started. Let's
Okay.
let's go deep diving into Christian yoga, which I think is an oxymoron. It's a contradiction in
I
terms. It
agree.
doesn't exist, right?
I agree.
You're gonna be either gonna choose Christianity or you're gonna do yoga, but you can't. Maybe you can do a few stretches at the local YMCA, and it's not a huge deal. But as long as you continue walking that path, like you're gonna find that your yoga practice comes into immediate conflict with your Christian beliefs, and
Yeah.
most people will choose yoga. So let's dive
Yeah.
into this.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to know how I got started looking at yoga, or how do you want me
Yes,
to start? Okay.
let's start there.
Okay. The most fun story of my life. No, so my son, when he was in kindergarten, was going to a school in Encinitas, and I made reference to this. So Encinitas is the home of the Self-Realization Fellowship, and we
Yogananda.
actually have, yeah, yeah,
Oh my goodness.
yeah.
I could talk for a long time about Yogananda and the Kumbh Mela Festival. I stayed at the Yogananda Self Realization Fellowship camp at the Kumbh Mela Festival because of Babaji and that whole scene.
Of
That's a whole
course
other
you
thing.
did.
But of course
Okay,
of course I did.
you
Obviously.
did.
Well, let's continue. Let's not lose the thread yet.
Yes.
Let's
Okay.
continue.
So,
Yes, oh my goodness.
so many places to go. So I lived in Encinitas, And for like the surfing world, Encinitas is huge. One of our famous beaches for longboarders is called Swami's, and that is
Uh,
because it sits right at the foot. I actually took my daughter there the other day. It sits right outside of the self-realization domes. And so there are the
got it.
self-realization domes, which is a retreat, and then there's like this garden that the public can go through so that they can meditate and everything. So that amongst other things, I mean, Encinitas is a place where, they don't have clay garden gnomes. They have like Buddhist prayer flags
Mm,
in their yards, and there are different various forms of yoga studios on every street corner. It really is kind of one of the most pagan places that I've ever been.
mm,
And so my son was going to school. I grew up going to public school. My dad was a public school librarian. He had stepped out of a Christian pulpit and was in the public schools. I had a very good experience in them. And so my son had started kindergarten and he had a Christian kindergarten teacher, and I was thinking everything was fine. And about 6 weeks after he started school, he came home with this little flyer in his backpack saying, Yay. We just want to let you know that your students every day have been doing school yoga, and we have this new program that's come in, and um, at that time, it was just at our school. It's replacing PE, and this is um, a secular form of yoga. And so I'd been working for truthXchange for a while, and my prayer partner, who prayed with me every single day at that time, is Pamela Frost. She's one of our head researchers,
mm,
and she sits on our board. And she had been, as we were praying for like the last year and a half prior to that, she had been researching yoga um, for truthXchange. And so I had been having this side conversation with her this entire time about what yoga actually was. So I got that piece of paper, and being the bold Christian witness that I am, I was like, it's probably stretching. Like, I just really wanted to like shove that piece of paper back in his backpack and like pretend it hadn't happened.
hmm
But I thought about it for a while and I thought, I should probably look into this. Like, before I say anything, I should go and observe a class at the very least.
Yeah.
Because if what Pam is true, then I wonder how sanitized this yoga really is. And I still was operating with the idea that there was sanitized yoga.
Yeah.
So I contacted the school and I asked them to pull him from the yoga classes. And I asked if I could go in and if I could observe a class myself.
hmm
And they were like, sure, absolutely. We
Oh.
understand why you have concern, but this is public school yoga, and it's been developed to be completely non-religious. And I was like, okay, thank you. I believe you, but I'd still like to go see it. So I went with the principal to a third grade yoga class. And right off the bat, they were doing an Ashtanga sequence of yoga, which for your listeners, at the time anyway, and I think it's still the same, like Ashtanga yoga is the most commonly practiced form of physical yoga in the West. So
hmm
you can go to the YMCA, you can go to 24-hour fitness, you can go anywhere, and you're probably doing Ashtanga yoga,
Yeah.
which it was kind of brought to the West and popularized by Sri K. Patabi Joyce. And Sri K. Patabi Joyce had a dream to have all of the school children in India do yoga for the purification. So just the asana practice for the purification of the country. He believed that if he could just get everyone to do the physical poses, that the country would be purified. And he was unable to do that. He was brought over to the United States, and he had as his disciples some billionaires who formed the Joyce Foundation. And the Joyce Foundation were the ones who were paying in Encinitas to put this yoga into the schools. So I didn't
hmm
know any of that yet, but I went into the class and they were doing Ashtanga yoga. And the yoga instructor, lovely young woman, was leading these 8-year-olds in the yoga sequence. And they got to doing sun salutation. And Ashtanga yoga always carries the sequence of sun salutation.
Yes, it does.
And so the kids are going through and they're doing the sun salutation poses, some of which just look like normal stretches. And she's saying to them, as we do the sun salutation, let's talk about the sun and what the sun does. And so she was asking the kids, what benefit does the sun offer us? And they were saying, like, the sun helps food to grow. You're right. So you would be thankful to the sun for your food. Yes. And they're doing sun
Yeah.
salutation. And the sun makes me feel warm and good and da da da. And eventually the conclusion was that we should be thankful to the sun for everything in our lives because without the sun, there would be no life. So it literally was not just physical obeisance to the sun, but she was also training the kids to speak their thanks to the sun as they were doing this.
Yep.
So I'm kind of standing there and I was like, this is sort of religious feeling.
Hmm.
Um, and I was trying to think about what to say to the principal when we came out, and they got to the very end, and the yoga instructor had all of the kids get into this big circle, and she had them all get into lotus position, and they called it the namaste circle. And so she
Uh,
had the kids put their
uh,
hands up as they're in lotus position, and they turn to each other. I bow to the light in you. I
yep.
bow to the light in me. The light in all of us makes us one. Namaste. And she said, and remember, kids, namaste means respect. Goodbye, and like launches them back out into their school day.
Sure it
And I was
does.
like, wow, like, this is super religious.
Yeah.
And so as I was walking out with the principal, he was like, see, so, this is totally sanitized and we'll go ahead and get your son re-enrolled into the yoga program. And I was like, no, no, no. Uh, I think his name was Dr. Baird. Dr. Baird, that was really religious. Like my son cannot participate in that. And it was really interesting because I'm 6 foot tall. He was like 6'4", and he kind of wheeled around and like looked right down into my face. And he was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean that like a Christian can't be involved in this? Like, you saw what we did in there. We're teaching kids to respect each other. Like, don't Christians believe that kids should respect each other? And this is where I think for the first time for me, Truth Exchange really came into play for what to say in a situation like that, because I don't think I would have had the vocabulary for it before, but I was able to say to him, well, actually, you're teaching kids to respect each other because they all contain a divine spark that makes them one. I don't believe that. I teach my son to respect other people because God, who's outside of us, made us image bearers. We're all created in his image, and that's why we show respect. And those are two radically different worldviews.
Hmm.
And I was just kind of standing there like looking at him, and and he just stared at me like he just didn't know what to say, and he was like, fine, and he was gone. Um, and so they kept my son out. Like they sent him to a fifth grade class. He was a kindergartner. They were sending him to a fifth grade class during yoga. And he was sitting through like a math lesson. He's studying to be a math teacher now, so I guess it worked out. But
Huh.
I mean, they kind
Perfect.
of started like punishing the kids who slowly but surely were getting pulled. And I wrote some articles about it. And I was just I was really scared because his response had been so strong. But I was kind of like contacting other Christians and saying, like, hey, could you read this? I think people need to understand what's happening in these yoga classes. And so they pulled, I think there were like 18 kids by the end of the year who got pulled out of that particular class. But at that point, the Joyce Foundation had come to the entire school district of Encinitas,
Whoa.
and they offered like over $500,000 to have access to all of the kids in K through 8. I think it was 3 or 4 days a week to do yoga. And it was graded, it was required, it was during the school day. And so eventually that ended up having to go to court. But that was sort of my first introduction to what yoga was. And I kept asking myself, and I had a lot of Christians who were angry at me. I had a lot of people who Joshua like answered the phone for probably 6 months at the office because there were people who were calling and saying that, I should be fired. I received threats. I was told that I should no longer feel safe showing my face or my children's faces in the community of Encinitas. I mean, people
Very
got
namaste of them.
really, yeah, very, very namaste of them. And people got really up in arms. And So then I was starting to just really look at all of the different claims of like, well, there's holy yoga by Brooke Boone. Well, you read Brooke Boone and she has like a statement of faith on the yoga page, but when you go in and you read what she means by the vocabulary of some of her statements of faith, you find that it's very Hindu still. She's an
Yeah.
Ashtangi. When she talks about like God as the creator, she believes that he emanated like a an Om vibration,
Oh.
and that it's out of the Om vibration that God created, and so that when we're doing yoga, we're connecting ourselves to that.
Hmm.
Um,
Very Christian of her.
and so I have yet to find a version of yoga that is that could any realm be called Christian. At the most you can say is that it's sanitized,